All right, welcome to Of Mice and Men, chapters 3 and 4 lecture. Hope you enjoy this little picture here of that would be George right there, and that would be Lenny. Okay, chapter 3, where you guys are going to get started here, pages 38 through 65. It's probably one of the longer of the chapters. Please go ahead and read it, paying attention to all the lovely foreshadowing that occurs in this part of the story. Foreshadowing being when the author hints at future events through talking about current ones or other things that characters might discuss. And we'll talk about some of the foreshadowing in the lecture today. Also, really pay attention to how the characters, how they're described by the author and other characters, really especially since you're building your cases. Be paying attention to the characters and make sure to annotate like crazy, highlight, write, draw, whatever you need to do on your copy of the text. Make sure to really pay attention to anything you can use to build your case. Okay, so if you read the pages, go ahead and go on. All right, so in chapter 3, we get some background finally in the life of George and Lenny and their relationship. So in chapter 2, George says how he's Lenny's cousin and he looks out for him because Lenny got kicked in the head by a horse when he was a kid, and he promised Lenny's mom he would look out for him, but turns out they're not really related. They did grow up in the same town and they knew each other, and Lenny had an Aunt Clara who took care of him, but when she finally died, George kept taking care of Lenny. And when they were younger, when they were kids, George used to take advantage of his friend in the form of, making fun of him and torturing him even. And we know what Kant, as Mr. Taylor taught you all last week, what Kant says about the nature of torture and how it debases humanity, both the people being tortured and the torturer. Well, anyway, eventually George has this moral awakening when he realizes how wrong it is to make a weaker living being, a weaker person or creature suffer just for kicks, for fun, for his amusement. So he eventually stops and starts taking care of George, and they ever since have traveled around together and have been best friends, have been more than best friends, and even more than just brothers. But that's the whole point of what Steinbeck is trying to say, is the nature of their relationship is so unique and special and precious and rare, and we as readers are trying our best to understand it, to recognize it for its beauty, because all the other characters in the book don't really get it. Now, we meet Candy in chapter 2, Candy being an old ranch worker who, since having lost his hand, is unable to work. But he's kept around. He sweeps and he tidies up and does what he can around the place, because he is completely afraid of what will happen on the day when the ranch foreman says, "I have to get rid of you. I can't keep you around anymore." And he has an old dog, Lulu. Oh no, I apologize. That's Slim. Slim's dog is Lulu. Pardon me, kids. Candy has an old dog who is very old, and so old, in fact, it's pretty much blind. It's too smelly to take care of itself, or it's so old it can't clean itself. And eventually, Carlson, another one of the ranch workers, says, "Hey, I can take care of this for you. I can put him down. I can shoot your dog. It won't be painful. It'll be merciful and quick. I'll take care of it for you." And there's no option. Candy has to let Carlson do it, because in this cruel environment, letting the dog live out its days is not an option. If you can't be useful, if you can't find a way to maintain some kind of power in the society, you can't stay. Which once again really reflects this idea of inhumanity, man's inhumanity towards man, this idea of how cruel we can be to each other. And something to note is how almost every single character in the book is in some way or another powerless, whether it's because of a physical or a mental handicap, or age, class, and by class that means like social class, like whether you're upper class or lower class, race, gender. Almost everyone somehow in this book finds himself outside of the social power, people who have power, and everyone suffer because of this. They suffer horribly because of it. And the only reprieve and the only place to find some kind of way out of it is this dream that George and Lenny have. Their special friendship has allowed them to actually maintain a dream, something that they believe they will one day be able to accomplish, will one day be able to get. And that dream is of their little farm, and how Lenny knows he'll get to raise the rabbits, and he can't wait to have the rabbits, and George is just happy to have a place that's away from all the cruelty of the world, away from women who are troublemakers, from people who, cheat him of what is rightly his. And their dream of this farm where they can just kind of live out their entire life is the only place where they can find any kind of protection from the suffering that they face in the world. Now, there's a lot of foreshadowing in this section, and Steinbeck uses his foreshadowing to really advance the story towards the inevitable tragedy at the end. We know it's coming. We can tell it's coming. Things like the death of Candy's dog, how Candy's dog has to be killed, has to be put down. The incident up in Weed with the woman in the red dress, how George and Lenny had to leave because of the misunderstanding when Lenny grabbed hold of her dress and she started screaming, and his reaction was very defensive, was just to clamp down and to try and protect himself, and that meant holding onto her dress even tighter, and it freaked the woman out even more, so she screamed louder and louder, and eventually they were run out of town. And that's also kind of a bit of foreshadowing to how Lenny reacts to being frightened, is he just kind of shuts in and protects himself as best as he can. And then same with like the fight between Lenny and Curly. Curly is extremely antagonistic, and he feels himself, I mean, even Curly, though, being the ranch foreman's son and being probably at the highest point of power in the social structure of the ranch, he himself has this inability to feel secure in who he is. He feels really insecure, and it's mainly having to do with his wife and how he suspects her of kind of being a seductress with other men, and he doesn't really come out and say it, but it's hinted at, it's inferred by the reader that even Curly knows that his wife is kind of a tart being an old-timey word for a loose woman. And he's unable to let those insecurities go, so he reacts very violently and quickly to when he thinks he's being slighted, when he doesn't understand things. So Curly tends to establish his strength and his power when he's confused and frightened. And when he engages in that fight with Lenny, Lenny kind of does the same thing, in that when he's being physically assaulted, when he's being violently attacked, Lenny just wants it to stop. He doesn't understand why he's being attacked. He doesn't get why Curly's upset at him. George understands. Slim gets it. All the other men kind of see why Curly is the way he is. But Lenny doesn't understand that. And all he knows is that, Curly was hurting him, so Lenny does what he can to make the pain stop. And it's a very reactive way of handling the situation. When we meet Curly's wife, how she is, the way she interacts with the men, very flirtatiously, we know she's trouble. Like, Steinbeck really wants us to know how troublesome she's going to be, how she is nothing but a way she brings men down. She just is the downfall of all men. That's really what's going on there. Okay, and one of the last things to really kind of note in terms of foreshadowing when it comes to the death of Candy's dog here is how George hears Candy say very quietly how he really wishes he had been the one to shoot his dog himself and not let some stranger do it, which is a bit of foreshadowing for what might happen, especially since Candy also says that, he's had his dog since he was a pup, and George and Lenny have known each other since they were kids too. So it's a bit of foreshadowing going on. There's some inference for what you guys think is going to happen next. Moving on to chapter 4 here. So in chapter 4, we finally get to meet Crooks a bit more. And remember, the stable buck is what he's often called, that derogatory term for a black man. Crooks really feels his isolation and is really bitter because of it, and understandably so. I mean, he has to work on a ranch with all white people and has to serve all the needs that they need in terms of maintaining the stable, but he's not allowed to play cards with them. He's never invited to or to go visit the brothels with him, and he has separate quarters from everyone else. He's not allowed to be part, like one of the gang, and so his isolation, his being lonely really helps reinforce how he views the world. And what's really interesting about Crooks, though, when it comes to the way Steinbeck presents him, is that he's probably one of the most believable characters in the entire book. Like, if we didn't have this Crooks, we might not have gotten completely three-dimensional characters, because Lenny is almost too innocent, and Curly is almost too mean and antagonistic, but Crooks is much more believable, especially since he is he's able to both condemn when Lenny talks to the farm as pure foolishness, but at the same time want to hear more about it and be like, oh, I wish I could dream for a farm like that too. And so that seems very realistic. A lot of us, it's very human to like mock when someone has a dream, but then secretly wish for kind of the same thing ourselves. And what's very interesting is how in a better world, in a world away from the Depression era America, from the ranch life where it's kind of dog eat dog, where you have to be strong to survive, Crooks, Lenny, and Curly's wife might have all been able to be friends, or at least been able to form an alliance together. But because of how cruel the world is, the fact that society punishes them for being black or mentally disabled or being female or anything like that, they actually end up preying on each other. So there's this idea of how the weak will attack the weaker, just like how the strong attack the weak. The weak actually attack the weaker too. Like with Curly's wife, she actually displays this moment of heartbreaking vulnerability, right? And she shamelessly confesses her loneliness and how unhappy she is in her marriage and how she had these dreams of what she wanted to do, but because she recognizes the men before her starting to pity her, rather than be pitied and seen as even weaker than them, she attacks them for their weaknesses, making herself seem more powerful. And that is the nature of the ranch, of how inhumane people can be to one another. And that is also where I'm going to leave you with this lecture to be looking at. So I want to remind all of you to go to Echo. There are discussion questions to answer for chapters 3 and 4. And as I mentioned in the previous video lecture, there is a project resource called Steinbeck Illusions. And in that handout, there are links to information and understanding of the different things that Steinbeck alludes to. And an illusion, I'm going to go ahead and here and type that word out for you. An illusion is a word, it's when something is referred to in a text. And there are a lot of illusions. And to help you out, I've created an Echo document, like I said, that you can open up and look through, and I'll make sure to tell you guys in class as well. If I haven't yet, you're hearing it now. So please do the Echo assignments for chapters 3 and 4.